Well, hello there. I'm sorry. You've caught me doing some laundry. Can never find all the socks when they come out of the dryer. Isn't that funny? I should write a horror story about that. Oh wait, I think I did, didn't I? Regardless, welcome to today's episode of Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. I tell you, it seems like I do laundry almost as often as I write great stories, which I suppose, depending on my audience, is pretty often. But, not to give myself too big a head, today's episode is, again, about other people's great stories. So let's get right in, shall we? Our first story today is written by Gangar818, and it's about a strange gift that becomes more of a strange haunting. So let's hear a little story about Jack.
I've had it since I was a baby. Left on the porch the day my mother brought me home from the hospital. Box unmarked, but adorned with a shiny red bow. We were never quite certain where it came from. That's Jack. It sure is cute, my mother remarked. My 18th birthday was a few weeks ago, and we were cleaning out my old things. I'm going away to college next month, and Mom is planning on turning our storage area into a craft room. Actually, I've always found it a little unsettling, I said, my face wrinkling as she passed it towards me. It's got a certain peculiarity. I went to put it in the pile for the dump, but before I could drop it, she snatched it back. Absolutely not. I've always loved Jack, and you need a piece of home to take with you to your new dorm. It's not like you can cover up with your baby blanket anymore. She placed her finger on the handle and began to turn it rhythmically. The haunting nursery rhyme sound began to fill the room, and it felt like the music was seeping into every crevice. I knew what was coming, but I still couldn't help but jump when the clown burst free of the box that held it captive. My mom laughed. Honey, you've got to relax. I know you're stressed with all the changes coming up, but it will be great for you. Let's go get lunch. Then you can come back to pack. She had a point. Moving away from home that I've always known did make me a little anxious. It's only ever been me and Mom. We've always been pretty close. I got up and went to change into some less grubby clothes for lunch. As I got near the doorway, something gave me pause. Couldn't quite explain it, but I felt the overwhelming urge to turn around. As I turned, I saw the clown staring back at me with its permanently sewn-on grin. Sorry, buddy. I'm definitely not taking you with me. I slowly opened my eyes, the sunlight comfortingly warm on my face. I smelled the distinct aroma of my favorite childhood breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes and bacon. Moving day is finally here. I don't let myself feel the weight of it yet. Instead, I hop up and make my way downstairs. There she is, the college girl. I thought you could use a little treat this morning, Mom said, coming over to squeeze me tight, her cheek against mine. I'm so proud of you, honey. Now let's eat. After breakfast, I showered and got ready for the day ahead. I felt excited and nervous, but not sure which emotion was more prominent. I had already gathered my things at the bottom of the stairs the evening before. I could hear my mom loading everything into the back of the SUV. So I quickly brushed my hair and went down to help her. Mom, I got it. You're going to throw your back out again. I lovingly nudged her out of the way before placing my belongings into the vehicle. After about 20 minutes of trying to arrange everything to fit, I finally solved the puzzle. All right, Mom, we're ready to go, I yelled across the house. It already felt a little emptier. I leaned against the wall, taking it all in for what could be the last time for a while. I was moving 5 hours away, and without a car, making it back home wouldn't be easy. Honey, look, you almost forgot it. Mom came down the stairs, holding the jack-in-the-box in her hand. Great. I wanted to leave that dreadful thing behind, but if it meant a lot to Mom, then whatever. I can toss it in a drawer or something. Certainly won't make any friends by leaving it on display. Now we're ready, Mom said, grinning and giving me a big hug. It was time to hit the road. It was November, a few weeks before my first college final. I hadn't exactly adjusted amazingly to dorm life, but I couldn't complain either. My roommate Sara was friendly enough, but our relationship was mostly like an older sister, constantly trying to give her dorky sibling a makeover. Me being the dork, of course. "You have to come out tonight. You've been studying way too much. It's only a couple of drinks with the guys. I won't take no for an answer. Honestly, you gotta get away from the dorm room. It's so stale." Sara stared at me, waiting for a yes. The look on her face told me that I wasn't going to get out of this one. Begrudgingly, I agreed. About an hour later, yeah, it took her that long to get ready, we headed out. We were going to a local bar. It's basically a frat boy hangout. But I was content to have a beer and sit in the corner, pretending to have a good time before I made an excuse to head back to the dorm. The place was packed, full of students who didn't care about studying because they were here on mommy and daddy's money. Well, unlike most of them, I actually needed my good grades to keep my scholarship. Sara found me at a small table and handed me a beer. "Drink, you'll feel better in no time." I could hardly hear her over the blaring music and the chaotic crowd of voices. I definitely needed a beer to get through the night. I chugged it down quickly. "Damn, kid, didn't think you had it in ya," Sara remarked. I didn't either. I'm not usually a big drinker, but it was actually pleasant, so I ordered another one, along with some fries. It didn't take long before I started feeling what I assumed was an alcohol buzz. It was foreign to me. I'd never drank before. Was this really what it was like? Was I drunk? I felt out of control, floating almost. My vision blurred, and I could only just make out Sara standing in front of me. "Where'd you come from?" My speech was a little slurred, but I didn't hear a thing, even though her lips were moving. "Huh?" She took my face in her hand and spoke loudly. I could hear her this time. "Let's get some fresh air." She escorted me outside the bar and into what looked like a spare parking lot in the back. It was dimly lit and a little spooky, but thank goodness it was quiet. "Be right back," she said, and then she was gone. It was definitely more spooky now that I was alone. I felt a hand on my back and assumed that Sara had returned, so I spun around and it wasn't Sara. Suddenly I was surrounded by 3 guys. The smell of cheap aftershave and alcohol mixed with nicotine in the air. Wait, I recognized some of these faces. They were the guys that Sara and I had met up with at the bar. "Listen, if you're looking for Sara, she already went back inside. Sara told us you'd be here," said one of them. That was the last thing I remember about that night. Rather, it's the last thing my brain will let me remember. I woke up in my dorm room bed, scratches on my face and hands and chest and legs. My right eye has a giant bruise. My whole body hurts. I don't want to think about what happened to me in that parking lot. I didn't see Sara. I wondered if she was hurt. I wondered where she was. I painfully sat up in bed. My vision was slightly blurry, but I could make out Sara in her own bed. I grabbed her shoulder and gently shook her. "Sara, are you okay? Please wake up." She stirred back to life. She saw my face and immediately gasped. "Jesus, kid, that may need stitches." That was it. No shock, no shouting. It was like she already knew what I was going to look like when she woke up. Wait, she looked perfectly fine. What was going on here? My mind started spinning back to the parking lot, back to Sara leaving me to get back to the beer. The beer. You did this to me," I hissed at her. "How could you?" Tears started rolling down, stinging every scratch as they dripped off onto the floor. Her cheeks flushed, and I knew she was holding something back. I didn't know. They told me they were just going to scare you. I never meant for you to get hurt." But there's hardly any emotion in her voice. "Bullshit. You knew what they were putting in my drink, and you knew you were going to leave me alone in that parking lot. You're a monster." I stormed out of the room. I had nowhere to go, but I slouched down by the trees and cried. One of my study buddies found me there. Seeing Jordan's face brought me comfort. She let me come back to her dorm room. I was too upset to tell her what had happened, what I remembered and didn't remember. I fell into a deep slumber on my bed and didn't wake up until early the next morning. Jordan was asleep on the floor. I slowly tiptoed out of her bed and grabbed a glass of water. I needed to go home. I just wanted my mom. Usually, Sara didn't wake up until 10 on Sundays, so I decided to go pack a bag and try to find a bus to get me home as soon as possible. As I began to turn the key for my room, something immediately felt wrong. I'm scared to open the door, but my need to get home was more powerful, so I did, and then I saw it. Jack. Jack was in the middle of the floor, still smiling his permanent grin. But how? I couldn't hear anything over the sound of my own heartbeat. My breathing was quick and shallow. My arms were covered in chill bumps. Then, oh God, I finally took my eyes off the grinning little clown and saw Sara. She was lying in her bed, her throat sliced open. She was surrounded by a pool of blood, and it was still dripping down onto the cold tile floor. The sound of my heartbeat was now replaced by the sound of the dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The door was locked. The window was closed. Who could have done this? There'd been no one in here but Sara. And Jack. Drip, drip, drip. He's always been unsettling. But there's no way. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing makes sense. My breathing is even more shallow. My vision began to fade. I thought I was going to pass out again. I thought I woke up on the floor. There's barely any sunlight coming through the windows. The whole day had passed. Suddenly, everything came flooding back. Sara and Jack. Where are they? I didn't see Sara on the bed. I didn't see Jack either. There was no more dripping. Just silence. Even the bloodstains were gone. It was like she was never here. But I know what I saw. The thought of it makes me vomit onto the floor. I was shaking. The sound of my heartbeat filled my head again. I heard something else now. Something like music. I crawled towards the sound. I'd heard it before. My brain was having trouble putting it together. I crawled closer. It sounded so familiar. Then I placed it. Jack. The tune is now more haunting than I ever could have imagined. Do I dare inch any closer to it? I have to. I have to know. It's coming from outside the storage bin, where I put it so many months ago. I slowly opened the drawer to see it. That grin. That red nose. Jack. I grabbed it and ripped open the door to the dorm hallway. I run as fast as my legs will take me and dump it into the nearest trash bin. I still hear the music playing as I walked away. I heard it all. Sara's voice, my breathing, and the drip. 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 It was December 23rd, and I was sitting next to my mom on the couch, underneath the quilt my late grandmother had made before she died. Christmas tunes hummed low in the background as my mom snored. The embers in the fireplace glowed red hot beneath the log that had burst itself in half. Bernice, our cat, slept quietly in the spot she claimed as a kitten. Home. I wasn't sure if I'd ever make it back after everything that happened. But now, it was a few days off from Christmas, and life felt almost normal again. At least I had tried to make it feel normal. It wasn't easy. Those thoughts cut through the silence sometimes, when you least expected it. Suddenly, my brain whispered a single name. Sara. They never found Sara. As a roommate, I was naturally questioned. I said I hadn't seen her since the night at the bar. I wasn't sure how I had ever come up with an explanation for the events that occurred. I'm not sure I know what happened. Sometimes I try to convince myself that I imagined it all. All I know for certain is that Jack's gone. Cast off to some far-off landfill, hopefully smashed into a million pieces and burned for good measure. Doesn't matter now. All that matters is that I'm home. I let my thoughts get taken over by the sound of the fireplace crackling, Christmas carols, and what is that? It was quiet, but it was there. I sit up on the couch and tilt my head back towards the stairs. Turn the radio off so I could hear more clearly. It couldn't be. I listened closer. There's no denying it this time. Jack. The music stopped, just short of the moment where Jack would come flying out freely from his metal cage. The house went completely silent. I walked towards the stairs, and suddenly I froze in place, terrified to shift my gaze upward. Do it. Just do it, I told myself. It's a stupid clown in a stupid box that might not even be there. You're probably just dreaming. Finally, I looked up towards the landing. Jack, the same grin as always, stared back at me. I felt dizzy and nauseous, my head pounding. I thought I might. I heard birds chirping. I opened my eyes. What time was it? I was just sitting on the couch with my mom. She must have helped me to bed last night. I remember having a terrible dream that the clown was back. What a nightmare. I really should see about getting in with a therapist one of these days. I made my way back towards the stairs. I wondered if Mom was up. It's Christmas Eve, and our tradition is always to open up a gift today. I'm really excited to see her reaction to everything I picked out for her. I headed down and walked into the kitchen. I startled myself. I keep forgetting Mom's kitchen redecoration included a very ill-placed mirror. I shook it off and laughed at myself. Then I saw there was a note on the kitchen counter. Honey, had to run out early for errands. Go check the living room table. There's a surprise waiting for you. Love, Mom. My Christmas Eve gift. I wanted to wait for her, but she clearly wanted me to have it early, and I can hardly stand anticipation. As soon as I entered the living room, I saw the box on the table. It was wrapped in snowflake paper and topped with a beautiful silver bow. I wondered what it could be. I secretly hoped there would be meticulously hidden holes to allow air for a new kitten. Doubtful. Time to just open it up and see, I guess. I untied the bow and gently lifted the lid off the box. I thought I saw what looked like fur. Could it be my kitten after all? I had to find out, so I fully removed the box lid, hands a bit shaky with excitement, and I screamed as I fell to the floor. My heart felt like it had dropped all the way to my feet. I couldn't breathe or think or function at all. It wasn't fur. It was hair. My mom's severed head lay inside the box. Cold, lifeless marble slits where her eyes used to be. Her ruby red lipstick is perfectly in place. My lifeline. My best friend. My home. I felt like I was going to spiral into nothingness. I had to call for help. Who cared about the explanation? My mother was gone. Someone or something needed to pay. My whole life had been ripped away from me in an instant. I managed to pick myself up off the floor and stumbled back across the house into the kitchen to find the phone. Instead, I saw another pair of lifeless eyes looking back into mine. In that instant, I knew there was no escape from this. He was there in the beginning. He'll be there until the end. Jack.
Red sock, blue sock, white sock, pink sock. yellow sock. Ha, these ones have a cow being abducted on them. Oh, sorry, I usually talk to myself when I'm mating socks. That's such a weird word, mating socks. It's got some weird connotations. I don't want to look too closely at it. Let's go on to our next story by Mean Classic 7739. And it's about a pretty popular topic on this channel. Scouts out in the woods. So, let's learn a little bit more about what took Charlie. Me, Charlie Baker, and Marcus Kennedy sat by the campfire with our Cub Scout troop. 3 best friends, all enjoying each other's company. Charlie was in the middle of one of his infamous scary stories. He was always the best storyteller. Everyone could joke that one day he would become an author or something. Gosh, if only that were true. If only he'd just made it past that night. Charlie reached the climax of his story, and we all screamed as the character of the story was attacked by an axe-wielding, goat-headed man. Then it ended, and our screams of terror turned into affirmations and applause. As usual, it was a great story. The others started to tell their scary stories. Marcus told a story about a hook-handed man nailing people to the front door. Another scout told a story about a werewolf stalking a family on the night of the full moon. But none of them matched. None of them reached the terrifying level of Charlie's story. We'd always wondered about his secret, how he'd gotten so good, but he always told us that it just came naturally to him. We didn't believe that, but it was mostly because we still hoped that we'd be as good as him someday. After a long while of sitting by the fire, I noticed Charlie slip away from the fire, exclaiming that he was tired. Not too much later, I agreed with the sentiment and retreated to our tent. It was quite a distance away from the others. I was still warm from the fire and pulled myself into my sleeping bag next to Charlie. I was out. My sleep was good, long and peaceful. That's how it should be. But it was interrupted. That night I experienced something that has haunted me to this very day. It started with me sitting up in the tent next to Charlie. I was hearing things outside, strange grunts, and what I can only describe as barking purrs. They were odd. I can't really describe it, but they almost had a bird-like quality to them. Along with the strange noises were heavy footsteps in the leaves. With every footstep, I slowly began to realize how big the thing must be. I looked around, every which way, worried about what could be outside. Bracing myself, I put a hand against the nylon wall, only to feel something press against it on the other side. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My body, seemingly in a state of shock, wouldn't let me move. The sounds the creature was making shifted. The barking purr-like sound slowly shifted into this low, droning growl. I shook so violently I thought I might pass out. I'd never heard anything like it. There was absolutely nothing to compare it to. With this new sound came a new, horrible, overwhelming feeling. Dread. That was the feeling that came over me. It was so incredibly all-encompassing that I couldn't move. It was so immense that I felt like I was being suffocated by the emotions. But I don't even know how that's possible. It felt like I was drowning, like one of those nightmares when you're in a car slowly sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean. You know, there's nothing you can do to escape, so you just sit there and shake, dreading your inevitable death. That was the feeling that came over me in that tent. Then another sensation hit me. It wasn't a feeling, it was like something much worse, something much more physical. The smell. The putrid smell of the thing almost made me want to puke. It smelled like a massive dumpster of burning trash. But there was something else there, too. The horrible smell of something dead, something rotting. It smelled like how I'd always thought a skunk would smell. A wet, dead, horrible smell that just makes you wish to never smell again. I wanted to cover my mouth, but I was so afraid I just sat there, drowning in fear and that horrid aroma. I listened to heavy footsteps patrolling around the tent. They rustled the dry leaves and broke branches. It kept going in a concentric circle that slowly seemed to close in on the tent. Suddenly, I began to regret putting our tent so far away from the others. That afternoon, I'd convinced Charlie to help me move it farther from the others. We both liked to go to sleep early and hated being kept up by the other scouts' endless chatter. It was getting closer. Its heavy footsteps grew louder and louder. I imagined the thing growing larger and larger, seeming to feed off my fear. I shook. I wanted to be anywhere but here. I wanted to escape, to see my mom, my dad, my brothers, anyone, and anywhere but here. Then I heard things begin to drag against the nylon of the tent. It sounded scratchy and weird. It sounded similar to nails on a chalkboard, mixed with the sound of dragging your nails on a piece of nylon. The noise of the dragging on the nylon was so shrill it stung my ears, but I was so frozen with dread and fear that I couldn't do anything. I didn't reach to cover them, afraid somehow that it would know I'd moved. I felt weak. I wanted to do something, to move, to scream, but my petrified body refused. I felt lightheaded. I felt sick to my stomach. The smell, the sound, the fear, it all felt so overwhelming. It lasted hours. The whole time I felt I was on the verge of puking or screaming, but I could do nothing but sit there and listen. At some point, a light drizzle began. At first, I hoped that it might drown out the horrible sound, but it might also protect me from the unknown that I so desperately did not want to face. Instead, it just added to the cacophony of horror and terror. It felt like I was on my breaking point. I still sat there, absolutely petrified. My eyes followed the footsteps as they slowly made their way around the tent. Each heavy thump sent a shiver down my spine, reminding me of the immense size and power of whatever horrible thing was out there. That's when I heard it. The sound of ripping nylon. I looked to see something cutting through the tent wall along the zipper. Or, I don't know if cutting would be the right word. It was more like an exact rip from a cut. I looked to see what it was, but it was too dark. I watched the dark shape slowly rip further and further down until there was a gash from top to bottom of the tent. I shook so violently that I had to assume the thing or the person knew I was there. Once the large gash had been made, something dark started to make its way into the tent. I looked, but the smell intensified as it approached. The smell was so bad that my eyes watered. It was such a thick, overpowering smell that it was choking me. I felt like I could taste it, and it was horrendous. I endured through the pain of my tears and looked once more. I saw it began to come inside. It was very large, very hairy. From the small amount I could see, it looked to be a limb. It reached into the tent, seemingly being careful not to let any more of its body in. Its limb, its arms, slunk further and further in, and I almost wanted to throw up. That thing, that arm, was way too big, way too long. It could reach from the door to me without even putting its shoulder into the tent. It felt so uncanny, so wrong. It looked like something you might see in a night terror. But the worst part was it was real. It seemed to reach around the tent, seemingly trying to find what was inside. When its arm bumped against my backpack, it grabbed hold of it with what seemed to be freakishly long fingers before slowly and eerily dragging the bag out of the tent. My fear didn't die, but gradually lessened, knowing that it was only here for that. The thing just wanted my bag. As it slowly lifted the backpack, it struggled. The large bag hardly fit through the hole. Little pieces and parts of it kept getting caught as the thing tried to yank it through. The still, omnipresent droning call was interrupted by a growl, followed by a loud rip. The bag disappeared through the now significantly larger hole. The hole flapped open and closed in the light breeze, and I could make out the massive dark shape of the creature. I looked away, horrified at the size of the thing. Silence for a split second. I listened to the thing as it rustled around with the bag, letting out slight grunts that sounded frustrated. It fiddled with the bag for an amount of time I can't determine, before it let out one especially loud grunt and a loud ripping sound, then a clatter of contents as my bag fell to the ground. I recognized all the different sounds, the thunk of my water bottle, the thump of my clothes, the crash of my utensils, the clinking crunch of a bag of chips. It fiddled around with the objects. Crack, the sound of it shattering something made me jump internally. I was still so scared of this thing. Up to this point, it hadn't actually shown any aggression. It had seemingly just been curious. But the mere thought of it breaking something changed that idea. I prayed in my head that this thing would go away. I just wanted to go back to sleep. I didn't care if it took my things or whatever. As long as it didn't hurt me, I didn't care. I listened to the shrill noise of a plastic bag of chips being torn apart. Heavy snuffling followed, and I could vaguely hear the crunching of the thing eating a chip. It ate all the other chips as slowly as it had eaten the first. It seemed to be enjoying them, taking its time with each individual delicacy. Once it was done, I felt through the ground its weight shift back towards the tent. My heart started thundering like it was a marathon runner. That temporary relief had been destroyed in a mere instant. The horrible call began to come again, and all the fear returned in full, overwhelming force. Unable to move, still, I watched helplessly as the arm forced its way back through the hole. I felt its long, wet fingers briefly brush against my sleeping bag. They were so long. They reminded me of gnarled branches or the long legs of some spider thing. The fingers seemed to examine the bag for a second before pulling it. My life flashed before my eyes. Me, a 10-year-old boy, had to consider that I might be about to die, that something that shouldn't exist was about to drag me out and kill me. I shifted slightly, petrified, imagining it pulling me out and eating me whole. It let go of my bag. I closed my eyes in relief, praying it would just leave. But the arm slowly drifted to the other sleeping bag. Charlie. I'd been so terrified that I didn't even think about him, so occupied with my own well-being that I hadn't thought of my best friend. He lay next to me, still sleeping soundly with a slight grin on his face. I wanted to do something, to say something, but I could do nothing but stare as the thing began to grab at the end of his sleeping bag. Charlie didn't shake, didn't move, didn't even react. Time seemed to freeze as its hand glided to the end of his bag. It seemed to caress the bag for a moment before it gave a big yank. I felt his weight shift about within the confines of the tent. I can't explain, though Charlie seemed to satisfy it better. It got a tight grip on the bag and began pulling him out of the tent. It was prolonged, and he was slowly pulled out 1 inch at a time. His eyes opened wide, and without moving his head, he looked towards the hand. His face became flat with terror, but like me, he was frozen in fear as it slowly pulled him outside. His fear only seemed to grow when the end of the sleeping bag disappeared beyond the rip of the tent. Gradually, more and more were pulled out. I shook as one of my best friends disappeared through a hole in the tent wall. Just before he finally disappeared, his eyes met mine. They were terrified and seemed to plead for help, for someone to save him from this horrible fate. But there was no one. Once he was completely gone, I heard shuffling and fabric ripping as the sleeping bag was shredded. I imagined some giant with long fingernails clawing away at the helpless sleeping bag, trying to get at my friend. Then the ripping sound stopped, and I heard the slight thump through the pitter-patter of rain. Then the sleeping bag was thrown into the puddle with a splash, sounding much lighter now. It was then I realized that it had ripped him out of the bag and was now taking him away. I heard heavy footsteps growing fainter and fainter before fading away entirely. Once the footsteps couldn't be heard, the sound stopped. The horrible droning sound had finally stopped. Sobs and cries escaped my mouth, which quickly turned to agonized screams. I cried out words. I can't tell you what I said. I was in such a panic that it was just a word salad of pure panic thoughts. I think I may have said monster or Charlie, but I can't be sure. I heard the yelps and screams of the other scouts in reaction to my own. I shook in the corner of my tent as I heard my leader make his way over. I heard the thunk of his boots until they stopped. He hadn't reached my tent yet, so I couldn't comprehend when he'd stopped walking. Then he gasped. The thunking turned to a slam as he sprinted the rest of the way over and peeked inside the tent, calling our names. He saw me alone and shaking, too traumatized to even speak, besides a single phrase. Charlie. It took Charlie. I don't know if my wife is shrinking or my kids are getting too big. Can't really tell whose pair of jeans these are, but they're certainly not mine. Anyway, let's move on to our next story by DamnDeeWTF or Ditshepo. We'll be hearing a story about something we all struggle with sometimes. That thing that you just can't quite set your eyeballs on. That thing that hides in plain sight. In the quiet suburbs of Greenwood Heights, Laura and Daniel lived an idyllic life. Their neighbors admired them for their impeccable manners, their beautiful home, and their apparent dedication to community activities. No one suspected the darkness behind their polished facade, the carefully concealed secrets that defined their twisted existence. For years, Laura and Daniel had operated as a meticulous duo of child abductors. They preyed on vulnerable targets, carefully selecting children who seemed easy to snatch away without raising suspicion. Each abduction was carefully planned, executed with chilling precision, and followed by a meticulous cover-up operation to evade detection. On a particularly stormy night, their target was Emily, a 10-year-old girl with a penchant for drawing and a love for her pet cat. The rain pounded against the windows as Laura and Daniel crept through the shadows, their hearts racing with anticipation. They moved swiftly, silently, expertly bypassing the creaky floorboards of Emily's bedroom. With a precision born of practice, they snatched Emily from her bed, muffling her cries before they could alert her sleeping parents. In mere minutes, they were out of the house and driving away into the night, leaving only a child's empty room and bewildered parents who would soon be plunged into the depths of anguish. In the days that followed, the disappearance of Emily sent shockwaves through the Greenwood Heights area. The community rallied together, organizing search parties, distributing flyers, and pleading for any information that could lead to her safe return. Laura and Daniel acting the part of concerned neighbors, joined in the search efforts, their expressions carefully schooled into masks of worry and grief. But unlike their previous abductions, Emily's disappearance did not trigger the expected alarm. No Amber Alert was flashing on TV screens. No breaking news updates on the local channels. It was as if Emily had vanished into thin air without a trace, and the eerie silence that followed unnerved Laura and Daniel more than they cared to admit. As the days stretched into weeks with no progress in the search for Emily, Laura and Daniel grew emboldened. They began to plan their next abduction, confident in their ability to continue their reign of terror without consequence. Their next target was Sara, a 9-year-old girl who lived on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes and concerned neighbors. On a moonless night, Laura and Daniel struck again. They lured Sara into their car under the guise of offering her a ride home from the park, her innocent trust unknowingly sealing their fate. As they drove deeper into the darkness, Sara's laughter filled the car, oblivious to the malevolent intent lurking behind the facade of smiles. Arriving at their scheduled hideout, an old cabin nestled deep in the woods, Laura and Daniel believed they were in control. Their previous successes reinforced their false sense of invulnerability. They ushered Sara inside, confident in their ability to keep her subdued and compliant. But Sara was different. Unbeknownst to Laura and Daniel, Sara was not an ordinary child. She was a vessel for a malevolent entity that had, since their darkness, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. As the hours passed and midnight approached, the atmosphere inside the cabin grew charged with unsettling energy. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners, and the air hummed with an otherworldly presence. Sara's behavior shifted subtly at first, her gaze unnervingly steady, her words carrying an uncanny wisdom far beyond her years. Laura and Daniel brushed off these signs of unease, dismissing them as their paranoia and fatigue from the latest crime. But then, the inexplicable began to unfold. Objects moved on their own, sliding across tables and crashing to the floor. Whispers echoed through the empty rooms, words that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Sara's laughter took on a chilling edge, her eyes darkening with a malevolent gleam that sent shivers down Laura and Daniel's spine. As the night wore on, the entity within Sara began to assert its dominance. Sara's body contorted unnaturally, her voice shifting to a guttural growl that spoke ancient languages unknown to human ears. Laura and Daniel watched in growing horror as the child they had abducted became a conduit for something far beyond their comprehension, a force that thrived on fear and suffering. Their attempts to restrain Sara were futile. Ropes slipped through their fingers as if guided by an invisible hand, and locks on doors clicked open of their own accord. Panic set in as Laura and Daniel realized they were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted, trapped in a nightmarish game where the rules were dictated by forces they could not control. In a desperate bid for survival, Laura and Daniel tried to flee the cabin, their footsteps echoing loudly in the oppressive silence of the night. But each path they chose seemed to lead them deeper into the heart of darkness, further away from the safety of the outside world and closer to the entity's domain. Sara now fully under the entity's control, pursued them relentlessly. She moved with an unnatural grace, appearing and disappearing like a phantom in the shadows. Her laughter rang out like a macabre symphony, haunting Laura and Daniel's every step as they stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors of their own making. Exhausted, on the brink of madness, Laura and Daniel found themselves cornered in the cabin's dimly lit basement. The air was heavy with the stench of fear and the palpable presence of the entity, its dark energy coalescing around them like a suffocating shroud. With nowhere left to run, and their backs against the cold stone wall, Laura and Daniel faced the ultimate reckoning. They were forced to confront the horrifying truth of what they had become: monsters in human form, responsible for unspeakable atrocities that had torn families apart and left scars that would never heal. As Sara stood before them, her eyes blazing with the fury of the entity within, Laura and Daniel begged for mercy. They pleaded for their lives, their voices trembling with terror and regret. But there was no mercy to be found in the entity's wrath, no forgiveness for those who had willingly embraced the darkness in their pursuit of power and control. In a final act of defiance, Sara raised her hands, and the cabin trembled as if caught in the throes of an earthquake. Shadows, twisted and writhed, merged with Sara's form until she appeared as a spectral figure bathed in ethereal light. With a single gesture, she unleashed a torrent of supernatural force that consumed Laura and Daniel, their screams drowned out by the deafening roar of the entity's triumph. A storm raged on the outside, oblivious to the horrors that had unfolded within the cabin walls. The night sky remained indifferent to the fate of Laura and Daniel, their names destined to be whispered in hushed tones as a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurks within the human soul. As dawn broke over Greenwood Heights, the cabin stood silent and still, its secrets buried beneath layers of moss and ivy. The community continued with their lives, unaware of the evil that had once hidden in plain sight amongst them, the evil that had been unleashed and ultimately consumed its creators.
Could have swore I put 5 pairs of jeans in there. I guess my washing machine or my dryer is upgraded to eating jeans instead of socks. Pretty soon, I'm sure it'll be ready for human sacrifice. Maybe I'll leave it in the house when I move. It can be the next person's problem. Here comes a divisive little story by JankyCranky, someone we've seen a lot of on the show. I'd say I don't know why most people don't like this story, but it's pretty obvious, and I'm sure you'll remember it once you hear it. So let's hear a story about a strange song that seems to be following our original poster around. Let's catch a glimpse of hearing that strange song.
I've been hearing a strange song every night for a week now. Crazy thing is, I recognize that this song isn't even in English. I've studied Latin and Cantonese in college, but this song seems to be a mixture of both. The song sounds as if sirens are singing it. The song doesn't even rhyme. The worst part is, it keeps putting me to sleep and plunging me into a world of nightmares. I listened for over a week now, and I think the song goes something like this. There is a light inside your heart. Think about it. Your light is death. Your God is false. You will pay for your sin. Let us guide you, show you your true hell. You will know your sin, and you will be guided to better morals. I go to church every Sunday to find the answers, but I keep only seeing a trap door opening. I keep going to fortune tellers, but they never saw a good future for me. The night this all started was the first time I had the nightmare. The same nightmare I've been having for a week and 5 days now. This is how the nightmare goes. I wake up on a rocky floor that smells of brimstone. The sky is a deep purple, close to black. I wake up just as the world's sun is setting. The sunset appears to be beautiful. It's in a deep orange and purple range. Then, I see figures appearing like biblical angels. But these things slowly turn into clownish creatures, as though they were taking off their masks of some kind. I hear a childish laughter that slowly turns cruel, and after a minute, it's even crueler than that. By the 5-minute mark, it's turned into a fiendish cackle. The first angel says, "How foolish that your Bible has taken its full effect on you." The second one says, "Oh, you should have learned what a demon Abraham is." The third one says, "All right, sishet man, how do you feel about having what you've done to the true saints done to you?" Before the first insult finished, I would wake up in a cold sweat. I've been remembering this nightmare because of its reoccurrence. This morning, after I attended church, I felt a cold chill. Not like the usual chill. This felt like ice, all over my body all at once. It felt like I walked through something. I found my wife at her desk, writing some sort of paper. I peeked only to find that she had divorce papers in front of her. "Martha, what are you doing? This marriage can't go on any longer. My friends keep telling me I should go find a more suitable man. Well, I have found one." "But why?" "Don't but why me, Samuel. My friends don't want me to be with you anymore, and I have closed my ears to reason for too long." "Why, Martha?" "Listen, Samuel, you and your religious crap can go to hell for all I care. You support slave labor, and you call for the elimination of my friends, and worst of all, you forced me to marry you just to make your church happy. It's time I listened to my heart and left you, you right-wing idiot." She stormed off then, luggage behind her. She drove off in our car and sped off down the highway. I assumed she was going to a court to go through with the divorce. Anyway, I decided to take a cat nap this afternoon and nearly crapped myself at the same nightmare hit me. But no song was sung to me that time. I went straight into the nightmare as soon as I closed my eyes. Maybe that song was an incantation of some form. After the nightmare was over, I decided to ask a fortune teller for help. And this time, I decided to listen. Samuel Hill. It's a coincidence my name is close to the one in the exclamation, "What in Sam Hill?" It's not too late to mend. However, today is the last day to choose your path. Will you turn away from the lurking light and the trap that Abraham has set for all humans, and let your eyes adjust to the dark? Or will you continue on this evil path and let the true hell consume you within the last few days of your life? Whichever you choose, it may not change what you have done for your cult, but your future will be affected by what your heart lets you choose. However, I sense that it is unlikely you will change your ways. The probability of you having the ability to turn away from the church and the deadly trap it has set is less than 1%. But that doesn't mean that you can't change. But if you do manage to know your sin and change and help others, come see me again. I will see the results of what you choose. I called my wife to tell her the news of my finally listening to her, and she never answered. I decided to call her friends and apologize for everything, but I think they blocked me too. I'm now certain that Martha thinks I'll never change. I tried everything for the whole afternoon, from when I had lunch to now. Notes on cars, sending people good vibes, wholesome drawings that let people know that they matter and should have their rights. You know, the whole shebang. But all I got in return was pure anger and stones thrown at me. Now I'm thinking my actions have gone so far that they all hate me. It's as if, in my attempt to change, I have wriggled farther into the trap. I've been backed into a corner, and I don't know what to do now. I've looked back on my actions and looked at all my behaviors in the past on the internet, and I've got the results that I was a narcissist, an asshole, and now I've noticed my own narcissistic behavior. I've been bawling for the last half hour, trying to figure out what to do with myself. I've been trying to change myself, but no one in this liberal town where I live seems to want to give me a chance. I think now I'm ready to die. I feel like if everyone's going to say that I'm a lying asshole, the only way left for me is death. I want to listen and be better, knowing what I've done is wrong, but now being the cishet white male that I am feels wrong. Feels like I can't have any more second chances. Should you discover this note, I'll be in the hell that I've been shown. My body will stay in this world, but I won't be back anytime soon. I'm sorry, Martha. Sorry, Martha's friends, Alicia, Tina, Ezekiel, Yvette, and Hella. Sorry, Mr. Johnson, my fortune-telling friend. I really did some wrong things in life, and I realized that what I did makes my attempts to change look like a lie. I noticed that if I can't change in anyone's eyes, I would like to say that death is the only choice I have. I hope you guys can find it in your heart to forgive me, but if I really am beyond forgiving, I guess you can just burn my body. This was the suicide note left by Samuel Roger Hill, who hanged himself in the living room of his house at 6:30 p.m. today. He wasn't missed very much. The only people that did miss him were the members of his church, St. Jonathan's Evangelical Church. Doctors say that he may have been driven to kill himself by insanity, but this has never been confirmed.
One last story for you, and this one, I can assure you, is a doozy. Written by the BlackCycloneOrder, we hear about a man with a gambling problem and a place that maybe helps him curb it just a little. At least I hope he's learned a lesson after all this. So let's hear some rules about if you happen to be gambling with a man with a hat for a face.
All I ever wanted was for my wife and I to live comfortably. But the longer we stayed together, the higher our bills became. We'd already fought off debt from college, barely scraping by. Even after we paid them off, we were only able to afford a tiny apartment on the outskirts of New York. Sidewalks laid cracked everywhere, while finely condemned buildings sat sadly against their crooked foundations. Crooked lamp posts that hang only by electrical wires. Graffiti marked every street corner, and bland art that existed without rhyme or reason. Homeless people could be found on every street corner, a constant reminder of what would happen to my wife and I if I failed to keep up with our payments. However, I managed to make somewhat decent money as a plumber, but even then, it sometimes wasn't enough to deal with the loan sharks, the hefty utility bills, the food prices, and gas money. I was willing to do anything to get us out of there. And that is where I encountered gambling. I was willing to take the risk. I'd take any chance to obtain a reward, even just a small one. It started out with a handful of poker games. Then I moved on to scratch tickets and slot machines. All I needed was enough to get by. Unfortunately, obtaining a payday from the casinos was impossible. I started growing desperate, which only led to more debt. The whole cycle sucked me down like Odysseus' ship into Charybdis' maw. Just like that, my relationship with my wife began to tear apart. My wife and I were once so close. Before we married, there would be days that we'd work together at the wood shop, creating 3D prints of various sci-fi characters in video games. Other times we'd study the components of circuits and use them to create elaborate lighting displays whenever Christmas arrived. Our wedding day was supposed to be the greatest day of our lives. Instead of relying on the help of others, like we did back in college, we relied on ourselves. But my actions tore all that apart. I didn't know what else to do either. A few nights ago, I arrived at my apartment, having completed a 10-hour shift fixing drains of several upper-class tenements. I rested my hand on the knob, expecting the worst from my wife. Sighing, I pushed the door open. The moment I did, she was already in the front hall. Her eyes were scrunched, and she was holding a bank statement, smacking it for emphasis.
Care to explain? She demanded. I rubbed my temples, removing my scum-covered overalls and plopping them right into the nearest laundry hamper. We locked eyes. Breaking eye contact with her would only ignite her anger further. She was holding another piece of evidence of my failure to strike it rich. All I could do was stand there sheepishly, tail tucked behind me, and wait to get ripped a new one. No words would come out of my mouth. She marched up to me, holding it in my face. "Frank, you wasted $3,000 at the casino again, didn't you?" my wife bellowed. I set my toolbox down and washed the pipe gunk off my hands, looking down for just a bit. "Turn around and look me in the eye." Resting a hand on my eyes, I glanced over her petite frame. Then I began to speak. "We can live comfortably if you just give—" "Enough of your excuses. We nearly lost our apartment twice from all the betting on the slots. You wasted our heating money on roulette. And now this. The landlord wants $4,000 in 2 weeks. And if we can't get it sorted out, we're going to lose our apartment." I held up my hand reassuringly. "Look, just let me figure this out. I'll think of some way to get money." "You better. Otherwise, we're getting a divorce. You got it?" Without another word, I put on a casual outfit and exited for some fresh air, shutting the door behind me. I gazed back at the unpolished apartment number on the frame. Wincing, I clenched a fist and descended the rickety stairs. Eventually, my boots hit the cracked pavement, and I headed off. I stood outside a graffiti-covered subway station, pacing around, hands in my pockets. My fists constricted as I pounded a nearby wall. There's no way I could have been able to make that kind of money. Craps were too unpredictable, arcade machines were always rigged, and roulette was too high in stakes. Seeing red, I screamed and kicked a wall as hard as I could. My foot throbbed, and once I was done with my fit, I broke down sobbing. The sidewalk darkened with my tears. I pressed my head against it, clawing at it until my fingernails turned crimson. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. Wiping my tears away, I glanced over. A card was lying on the floor. Its borders were covered in green dollar symbols. The rest of the card was a silver color, shiny enough to reflect my face in it. Written in gold letters were the following: Aces High Casino. Win 1 round of blackjack and earn $50 million. No monetary wager needed. Table 777. My eyes lit up. All I had to do was win 1 game of blackjack and I'd be rich. Dimples formed at the corners of my cheeks and I pumped my fist. I nearly clicked my heels in joy, but I decided against it. I'd already caused enough of a scene already, and I wanted to make sure nobody knew my secret. When I flipped it around, it had an address also written in gold letters. Despite the address being in an unknown area, I still managed to pull it up on my phone's maps and arrive without much struggle. The casino itself was a pigsty, to say the least. Smokers polluted the air and the prison-gray interior. Slot machines with broken lights clicked and whirred while cheap dice clattered against tables with peeling felt. Meanwhile, the concrete floor was covered in colonies of roaches while neglected beer bottles sat against the rugs of several tables. The only thing that was well kept was the bar and a room draped with navy blue curtains and gold sashes. Emblazoned over the doorway was the number 777. This was the first time I'd entered a casino smiling. For once, I thought this was my lucky night. When I pushed the curtain away, they revealed a room with an ornamented black wallpaper, an assortment of oak desks, and other furniture. The walls were covered in fine Baroque paintings. On the floor was a single blue carpet covered in opulent tapestries. I followed the back wall to a single dealer table coated in green felt. 2 seats were present, with one person taking the seat on the left. He was shaking with what I assumed then was excitement. Behind him was a dealer, a trim man with blonde hair and a top hat over his nose and eyes. He wore a dapper tuxedo free of blemishes that shimmered in the light of a single hanging gas lamp. His skin was pure, free of moles, glistening with a slight amount of glitter. "Why, hello there," the man spoke, his voice slicker than the gel in his hair. "Are you here to win big?" Unlike the loan sharks, his teeth were cleaner than a freshly washed plate. "Yup, deal me in," I said, straightening my back, shuffling into the last seat. The other player had his jaw locked together. His eyes were drooping and bloodshot. Sweat pooled around his brow like glass beads. Just like him, I always felt nervous about losing, so their reactions were understandable. "You know the rules of blackjack. I deal out cards. You say hit me if you want more cards. Get closest to 21 without going over. Dealer only draws 2 cards, and you can also surrender your cards for half your bet. When you don't want any more cards, say the word stand," the dealer said, shuffling his cards through his hands and manipulating them like a sculptor with a ceramic pot. I double blinked. "Wager? What do I bet with?" "Play a game, and I'll tell you." The mystery man focused on passing out the cards. First, he brought out 2 cards for himself and dealt 2 more to each player. Instantly, he flipped over his cards. Jack King, 20. I clutched the velvet black card, seeing what I was dealt. A 10 and a 7 of hearts. I forced my face into a neutral smile. My stomach twisted. There was no way I could get 21 that easily. "Surrender," I said, pushing my cards to the dealer. All he did was shuffle the cards and toss me 2 more. They didn't even bother looking up at me during the process. The other players started clutching his stomach. His smile vanished. I carefully looked over the guy's cards. 7 and a 2 of clubs. "Hit me," the guy on the left choked out. An ace of spades. Total of 10. Sweat trickled down his head like a shower in April. His eyes welled up with tears, while foam developed in the corners of his mouth. I raised an eyebrow, wondering what his deal was. I knew the stakes of gambling, but my sixth sense was telling me something was just not right here. No, that couldn't be true. Even if there was some kind of string attached or fine print I didn't read, I couldn't risk giving up on that kind of money. Besides, this might have been my only chance to obtain such a vast reward without much risk. "Hit me," the man wheezed. 5 of hearts. His teeth chattered. While I waited for my turn, I stood up and walked around the room, getting a closer look at all the ornate gadgets and such. My eyes focused on a painting on the leftmost wall. It resembled a man in a rich military regalia, but something made my hair stand on end. His upturned white mustache looked damp, and his face sagged like they were crying. Linear, stick-like shadows were cast on the sleeves. Edging forward, they came into focus. Hands. I followed their form outward, which extended into oily, dripping arms. Shh! A faint noise echoed from somewhere in the room. "What?" I mouthed, turning an ear to the source. Shh! It came from the painting. I backed away, hands at my side. Was someone dragged into that painting? "Where are you going? You forgot to pay up," the dealer yelled back, hands slamming on the table and pulling out a sack of navy blue poker chips. I double-took. I thought the card said that no monetary wager was needed. There isn't. Then I looked at the ground. There was a second rug on the ground. The tapestry matched, but its pattern didn't match with the other rug. It was off-center from the rest of the decorations, like someone didn't even bother setting it up properly. Taking a closer look, I could hear faint whispers coming from it, too. When I looked back up, the guy on the left was gone. I rushed over, checking his cards. A total of 25. Swallowing saliva, I stood in confusion, wondering what to do next. I scraped my fingernails against my palm. I needed that money. If I didn't get it, I'd lose my wife and my apartment. And what about loan sharks? Only God knew what would happen to me if I didn't pay up. What was I going to do? What would happen if I lost? Would I turn into another object, just like the other guy? Or would it be a worse fate than that? That's because there isn't a monetary wager. I'm still taking half of what you owe. In my game, your payment is in pain. A sharp stab punched my left side. It felt heavier than before, like my veins were replaced with tungsten. I grabbed my fingers around my chest. The area around the pain almost felt like a tumor. Brushing around the area, I could make out a cylindrical mass. I tried to inspect it some more, but the pain overwhelmed me, and I crumpled to the ground. I crouched down on all fours, trying to get back to my seat, but the pain froze me in place. Reaching out a hand, I called out for help, but I got nothing. Slithering away, I pulled back the curtain to the entrance of the casino. I spat on the ground from the bludgeoning pain. Don't feel out of luck? You can still surrender once more and have 2 chances left. The dealer smiled, adjusting his hat. It was only a glimpse, but I caught a look at his upper face. His eyes were on his hat, and his forehead was blank. The dealer looked plucked straight out of an Alice in Wonderland book. What or who was this guy? Think long and hard about it. I saw you arguing with your wife. I clambered back to my seat. Still didn't know what the dealer did to me. Something in me forced me to get back up and keep playing. More questions ate at me the longer I played. How did he know that information? Then I remembered feeling a tap on the back at Grand Central Station. The card that brought me here. He couldn't have been human. Was he some kind of demon? I didn't bother asking. There wasn't any way he would spill the beans about his nature anyway. After what seemed like hours, I managed to writhe back to my seat, slumping over the table like I'd just had the worst hangover. Ready to try again? The charming man said, resting his chin on his interlocking hands. Reluctantly, I gave him a thumbs up. He took back the cards and began manipulating the deck again. I analyzed every move he made. None of the cards were tricked. He wasn't second dealing, and he didn't have any aces up his sleeve. Never revealing anything under the table either. His honesty was the only thing that brought me any reassurance. Still, keeping an eye out was critical. The dealer revealed his cards. 2 tens again. 1 of spades and 1 of hearts. His face was harder than diamonds and glowing like one, too. Not a pleasing glow, but one that vexed anyone that dared to glare at it. I looked at my cards. An ace and a 7. 18. Gripping my lower abdomen, I stayed crumpled in agony. The odds of getting a blackjack were slim, and stabbing pain skewed my thoughts. "Surrender," I wheezed. The words slipped out of my mouth like a dying breath of a wounded soldier. The dealer smiled, holding a pile of blue poker chips around him. He waved his hand over the mound and made an inaudible chant. Then they vanished. I held my hands over my face, bracing myself. Suddenly the pain doubled, shifting to my right like a mudslide down a hill. Now I knew everything the previous player was going through. I vomited out something hard and blue. It was a poker chip. Suddenly my guts turned and another 7 spilled out. My esophagus wound itself into knots, more contorted than cobwebs. "I forfeit." The man started to smile. "Without these?" With a thud, the hat-faced dealer pulled out a jar filled with a kidney and a piece of liver. They still oozed with blood that pumped and fit their containers. I remembered how the dealer said that there was no monetary wager. He never said there wasn't a wager at all, though. I paid in pain, and my wager was my organs. "You want them back? Then win them." He set them back on the ground. Now there was no choice. My fate was sealed if I tried to leave. I started to shed tears. If I didn't get those organs back and fast, I was done for. Even if someone saw me passed out on the floor, finding donors for organs wasn't guaranteed. And even then, it had just put me further in debt. Nothing would be solved. Then again, was trying to beat this guy even worth it? No, the reward was too great. Taking a deep breath, I sat back down. Reluctantly, I asked that he proceed. The dealer drew out cards like before. He took the cards and gave them a good shuffle. Plucking 2 cards out of the stack, he revealed them. A king and a 9. Another poker chip tumbled up my throat. I spat it out, red and blue plastic heaping together. Not paying attention to the mess I made, he handed me 2 cards. A jack and a 2. A 12. Hit me. An ace. An ace could count as 1 or 11, depending on what other cards were drawn. Still had a fighting chance. Hit me. A 5. His dead stare tore at my soul. I scratched against the felt, the wounds on my finger reopening. From the corner of my eye, I could see him frowning. Are you going to play, or do you want all that money to go to waste? Shut up, I said through gritted teeth. Hit me. I watched the dealer play out the last card. A queen. You lose, the dealer said coldly, grabbing a pile of poker chips and holding them close. He waved his hands over the mound and made another incantation. Then they vanished once more. Everywhere at once, burning pain seared my skin, making me black out. When I woke up, felt my arms, they were covered in something hard and blue and plastic. The clothes were gone. I examined my extremities and my torso. My skin was missing, replaced with poker chips. They were shaped to fit every part. Cracks filled with blood gushed out with every slight movement I made. Horrified, I spilled my guts. More poker chips slid out of my throat. Piles of skin laid clumped to the side of the table in hideous pink and blood-red sheets. I think you know what's at stake now. 1 try left. You better make it count, unless you want to end up as an object for all eternity. The rigidity of my plastic-coated skin made every movement expose more and more cracks, searing my muscles. I groaned as I raised myself up. Crimson liquid dampened the table. I pounded at it. This was it. I either walked out of here with my money and saved my marriage, or I lost and suffered a fate worse than death. Giving up was not an option. I gave the mysterious man a death glare, not even bothered by his resistance. He plucked out 2 cards, a 9 and a 10. This was my chance. Then my cards were revealed, a 10 and a 2. Fingers rattling, I took a deep breath and let the calmness seep into me. Hit me, I sputtered. Another 2. Huffing, I opened my mouth to speak again. The dealer just stared at me, tilting his head like a vulture waiting for roadkill. The poker chips rattled again, grinding against each other. Hit. I paused for a moment, collecting my thoughts. At a value of 14, I needed at least a 6 to beat the dealer, but an 8 or higher would result in disaster. Gulping down another chaser of saliva, I spoke. Hit me. To my chagrin, a 5 slipped out of the hand. I was now tied. Staring at the pile of skin and my other organs, I closed my eyes and shook in horror. An ace or a 2 were the only cards I could draw in order to win. I looked down at my cards, sweat dripping on the table. With a quick glance, I gazed at the eyes on the man's silk hat. Don't keep me waiting, the man demanded. I'd begun to hyperventilate. His stare grew more intense the longer I waited. His confident smile turned into a frown of irritation. Eyebrows and mouth were twisted into a hideous snarl. He rattled his fingers against the dealer's table. The cacophony made my ears go numb. Then I whispered, Hit me. The man darted up, smiling back in anticipation. I'm sorry, what was that? Closed my eyes, expecting the worst. Hit me, I screamed at the top of my lungs. Then, the last card was revealed. A 2. I had won. My mouth dropped open. The sheet of skin unfurled themselves and flattened over me. 2 organ jars spilled over. their contents rising in a beam of white and torpedoing back into my body. Immediately, I yelped at the top of my lungs, clicking my heels and doing a little jig. I regained my strength, instantly looking around for traces of my prize. For several minutes, I wasn't able to uncover anything. Staring directly at the dealer's face, I asked him to reveal the prize. "I don't have it with me," he said blankly. Not listening, I scrutinized every inch of the room, looking beyond his station, checking under the table, everywhere. I searched everywhere for my prize, my happiness dissipating. With each step I took, my smile faded even further, twisting into a frown. My nose crinkled. "Where's my 50 mil?" I demanded, overturning the table, ripping off the ornate paintings and yanking the tasseled rugs off the floor. "You promised me 50 mil if I beat you. Do you realize what's going to happen to me if I don't get that money, you charlatan?" The strange man just stood there, not even acknowledging my plea. "You promised me money. You're a thief," I roared, pointing an accusing finger at him. "I only did this for my wife, to save my marriage. I almost gave up my life trying to help my family out. You can't take that away from me." The demon stuck his hands behind his back and shook his head. He rolled his eyes back in thought. Something was up with him. "You aren't like the other gamblers," he said. "What other gamblers?" I said, looking back. "They all wanted the money for worthless things. A mansion with fountains and a view, hookers, a trip to Tahiti." He paced around me, his face rather relaxed and calm. Never once did he lose eye contact with me. "But you had such determination to help your family that you would risk everything. I admire that. It took me a while, but I figured out that you're actually a kind-hearted person." I saw red and tried to punch him. He grabbed my wrist, shoving it back. "Listen to me. I understand your rage. There never was a prize in the first place. It was nothing but a lure to capture those that wasted their lives away. But there's one thing you don't understand." I thrust my hand back. "I understand you nearly killed me for nothing." "Yes, but that was before I saw you the way you really were. Listen to my words." Slowly I relaxed my posture, but I remained firm. "Why should I listen to you?" "I can help you out of your situation." "You owe me money, you snake," I said, my nostrils flaring. "You never needed the money in the first place." Taken aback, I retreated. "What do you mean?" I said. My arms relaxed once more. "You're a plumber, aren't you? I saw you come home from work. I also caught a look at your schedule. 40 hours a week for $38 an hour for 5 days a week. That's $36,000 a week for 2 weeks. You already have everything you need." "But you don't understand. They need 4,000, I pleaded. He wouldn't budge. "Trying to earn this money via dumb risks and chance will not get you anything. Look at all the things you've done wrong." "And I want to change that," I said, wiping my eyes as they began to tear. "But what am I supposed to do now?" "The only way you can earn that money is through grit and spit," he said, walking around me. "You aren't going to find solace through good luck alone, and you already have the tools that some people don't. If you give up now, you might as well have lost. Think about it." With those last words, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers, disappearing without a trace. Slowly, I gathered my things and walked out of the casino, head hanging low. The next day, I was fixing an old lady's faucet, inspecting the leak. I wondered what the demon's words had meant. Before I stuck the wrench up to the U-trap, I remembered my pay. If I worked the same amount of hours as before, I'd only make $3,600. But if I pulled off some overtime and worked several extra hours, I might just be able to pay off the debt. I started staying up much later than before. Not long after, my wife started becoming suspicious. Eventually, she confronted me. "Frank, you've been staying up late. You going back to the casinos again?" she asked, hands on her hips. I closed my eyes, and instead of fear, calmness filled my veins, and my blood stilled. Not this time. I've been putting in some overtime." Her face loosened up for just a moment before hardening again. I held my hands up and motioned my palms downward. "Listen, I've been horrible lately. All my gambling did was drown us deeper in debt." Her expression began to soften up again, her frown vanishing. "I want to change things. We used to work so well together, doing everything to help each other. Instead of fighting against each other, it's time we made our peace, and we bring us out of debt together." I held my hand out for her to shake. She kept her arm pulled back and folded like a pincer of a mantis. Inch by inch, though, she extended it and took my hand. The following day, my wife convinced me to go to therapy and get out of my addiction, which I gladly obliged. Simultaneously, she decided to start up another job working as an electrician. Day by day passed, and we pooled our resources as one. Before our eyes, bills were paid, and debt disappeared faster than our eye floaters. Our financial status wasn't the only thing that changed. Her once crusty mood lightened up, and she began to smile more. She began to believe my words and began to respect the changes I made. And then we paid off our rent. We got a letter from our landlord saying that we now were even. The moment that letter came in, we embraced each other. The only question now was what were we going to do with the extra money. Not long ago, we ended up earning enough to create our own 3D project, this time of a companion cube. Day after day, we create more projects. Although we weren't as happy as our days back in college, we still could make the best of what we had. In retrospect, the hat-faced man put up a good fight, but I managed to come out of the casino with more than I'd gone in with. It wasn't exactly money, but it wasn't worthless either.
I'm sorry to say, but that's the end of our stories for today. But don't be sad. There'll be more to come, and we'll have many more cozy mornings, sitting by the fire, listening to the rain to come. So, until next time, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.